Hello, and welcome back to What We Have in Common. I'm Darren Hamilton. Let's talk about one of the oldest ideas in civilization, property rights. Not because it's a Republican issue, not because it's a Libertarian issue, because even cavemen understood the concept. See that cave? Yeah? Mine. Boom, political philosophy complete. You don't need a degree from Harvard. You don't need to read John Locke. You don't need a 12-part podcast hosted by a guy whose beard says, I own 3 artisanal axes. People understand ownership because if somebody walks into your backyard and starts making decisions about your property, your first thought isn't, perhaps we should discuss the nuances of public necessity. No, your first thought is, who are you and why are you carrying a clipboard like you've been authorized by God? Because nothing in America says your life is about to get complicated quite like a man in a safety vest smiling too much. Now, politicians love talking about property rights. Oh, they love property rights. Republicans praise them. Libertarians practically write love songs about them. Most Democrats agree with them too once you stop screaming culture war vocabulary at each other. Everybody says private property is sacred. Sacred. Which is interesting because apparently sacred now means exactly what it means in modern America. Very important right up until somebody else, more important than you, wants it. Because that's where eminent domain enters the story. And look, let's be fair. Sometimes roads have to exist. Sometimes bridges have to exist. Civilization occasionally requires difficult trade-offs. Reasonable people understand that. But somewhere along the line, absolutely necessary became one of those phrases that politicians stretch harder than yoga pants at Thanksgiving. Suddenly, everything is a necessity. Pipelines, expansion projects, developments, transmission lines, economic opportunities, future opportunities, opportunities for opportunities. At some point, necessary became the governmental equivalent of limited time offer. And it's amazing how generous people become with somebody else's land. Nobody volunteers their own ranch. Nobody says, you know what, bulldoze my house. I believe in infrastructure. No, it's always government saying, we need your sacrifice. Funny how that works. And nowhere is this contradiction more Texan than right here in Texas. Because Texans have a relationship with the government that resembles a barn cat. Feed us occasionally, stay out of our business, and don't touch us unless you've accepted the consequences. We don't like being micromanaged. We don't like being told what to do. And we especially don't enjoy hearing, good news, we've determined that your property would be more useful to somebody else. Which, by the way, is not exactly negotiation. That's basically monopoly rules written by a hostage negotiator. Landowners find themselves sitting across from corporations and agencies with armies of lawyers, engineers, consultants, and PR people. And somehow the conversation is always presented as voluntary. Sure, and a shark attack is technically a swimming lesson. Because once one side has 50 attorneys and the other side has Uncle Gary and a folder from the Home Depot, let's stop pretending that this is David versus Goliath. It's Goliath versus a guy who still prints MapQuest directions. And here's where my marine brain starts malfunctioning, because I was taught words matter, objectives matter, definitions matter. If property rights are fundamental, why do they suddenly become negotiable the moment a powerful organization shows up? If ownership matters, why does ownership become less important whenever somebody else's project gets labeled critical? If private property is sacred, why does sacred apparently mean subject to availability? Terms and conditions apply. Because that's not a right. That's a subscription service, and apparently we're all still on the free trial. See, governments and corporations have one thing in common. They hate hearing the word no. No slows things down. No creates obstacles. No forces explanations. No makes powerful people fill out paperwork, and powerful institutions dislike paperwork almost as much as vampires dislike sunlight. That's why rights exist. Rights are supposed to be inconvenient. That's literally their job. The First Amendment exists because governments dislike criticism. The Fourth Amendment exists because governments dislike limitations. Property rights exist because powerful institutions dislike barriers. A right that never inconveniences power is about as useful as a screen door on a submarine or on Congress. And can we talk about toll roads? Because toll roads are the funniest thing government has ever invented. Think about the sequence. Step 1, take the land. Step 2, build the road. Step 3, charge everybody for the use of the road. Step 4, act confused when people seem irritated. That's like borrowing your neighbor's pickup without permission, bringing it back with an empty tank, and then charging him an Uber fee. At some point, people are allowed to ask questions. And the deeper issue isn't roads or pipelines or one project. The deeper issue is trust, because ownership means something. Freedom requires boundaries. A free society needs places where government power stops. Places where citizens don't have to ask permission. Places where mine actually means mine. Because if every right evaporates the second somebody influential says, well, yes, but, then eventually rights stop being rights. They're just strongly worded suggestions. And history is full of governments that viewed rights as suggestions. That's not exactly the Yelp review we're aiming for. And this is where principles reveal themselves. Because principles are easy when they cost nothing. Everybody believes in freedom when freedom is convenient. The test comes when powerful people want an exception. That's when you discover whether you actually have principles or just campaign merchandise. Because saying property rights are sacred at a barbecue is easy. Defending them when lobbyists arrive, that's when the work begins. That's where the convictions become expensive. And that's where rights earn their keep. Because a right isn't measured by how loudly politicians celebrate it. It's measured by how uncomfortable they're willing to become in order to protect it. And if property rights actually matter, then they have to matter most when somebody in power decides that they're inconvenient. Because otherwise, you don't own property. You're just leasing it from people who haven't asked for it yet. And frankly, that's not ownership. That's just Netflix with fences.